Now, if you do a Google search, learning to let go of, it's interesting some of the things that come up here. Learning to let go of control, talks about the past, an ex, teenager, anger, a relationship, of things, resentment of past mistakes. There's people generally have an awareness that they need to let go of things, and they want to, but don't always know how to go about doing that. And so they seek for help in doing that. Now, we've all lost something or someone that means a lot to us. It could be a boyfriend or a girlfriend, could be a job, could be a friendship. Maybe you had some big expectations about something or someone that just all fell apart. Maybe you had some painful failure, which is still hurting. Perhaps someone hurt you deeply. It's hard to believe. And it may not have been recently. It could have been a long time ago. And it's still affecting you now, and you can't let go. Now, when this happens, it can be hard to let go. We can feel a sense of sadness, maybe an emptiness, some anger, or even depression. We find we can't get it out of our minds. We don't want to keep thinking about it, but our attention keeps coming back to that. We play these conversations over in our head. Now, all of these are experiences of loss. Now, I mentioned in the first session that my first wife died. That was the biggest loss I've ever experienced. But I want to go back earlier, till when I was a very new Christian. I was involved. I started a rock band with three guys I found who were also good musicians. I really like the Allman Brothers Band. I don't even know if you all know who they are, but we played a lot of that and their music. I used to play guitar about 3 hours a day back then, and I just loved that group. We started to play for others, but that wasn't our focus. We played this dance, and the last number, which is supposed to climax, we played a song from the Allman Brothers called Whipping Post, and the beat of that goes like dum 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 dum. Yeah, imagine trying to dance to that. Whoops, what happened here? I'm going to go back to sharing my screen again. Okay, sorry about that. So, yeah, so these are all experiences of loss. What happened, I got distracted by the thing here. With that group, I really enjoyed it, but one day the guys in the group told me they wanted to form another band to play a different type of music, and they didn't want me in it. Ouch. That really hurt. I had felt like I'd lost a girlfriend, and it was very painful for me. So we all have different things, senses of loss. Now, when we talk about how to deal with this, we're going to go into the unknown. Sorry, I couldn't resist here. We're going to talk more instead. What is the right response when we have these things that we have had no control over, no choice? Well, I believe the biblical response to loss is grieving with hope. Now, we are to grieve losses, to grieve them with the Lord, with others. We're not to be stoic. We're not just to push on and not think about it. Now, the Psalms are filled with people grieving over things they've lost or difficulties they're going through. They were not stoic. They didn't just try to push on. Like, here's an example from Psalm 6 and 7. It says, I am weary with my moaning. Every night I flood my bed with tears. I drench my couch with weeping. My eye wastes away because of grief. It grows weak because of all my foes. You can just feel the raw pain that they were experiencing when they wrote that. And so there is this grieving of a mourning the loss. Grieving involves processing the pain. We can't rush the process. If there's something that's hurt us significantly, it takes time. Weeping with those who weep means that we become others who are hurting. We empathize with them, but it also, the flip side, means letting others do this with us as well and involving them in the process too. Now, the other side is we're not just to grieve, we're to grieve with hope. Now, in this case of when we're grieving someone whose loved one who died and who was a believer, well, it's called out specifically to hope that we will be together with them forever with the Lord. 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 18 says, "We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others who do, who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will always be with the Lord." So that's a specific hope that we have for someone who's died in the Lord that we love. But for any loss, there is this hope that the Bible says that God will work all things together for good as we love God. Romans 8:28-29 is perhaps my favorite passage. I've had to cling on to that. Now, that situation I mentioned about with when that rock band broke up, before I was rowing crew in high school, but I gave it up that year so I could be in the band. And then I lost the band, I lost the crew. But what happened is, as a young Christian, I started getting more involved with believers there. And I made some deep lasting friendships. And God used that time, and it turned out to be very good for me. However, I don't think Romans 8:28-29 is saying that when something bad happens, something better will come along afterwards necessarily. Let's look at the passage. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to become conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. Now, it says all things work together for good, and there's two qualifications. First, those who love God, those who are called according to his purpose. Now, those who are called according to his purpose are believers, but he goes on to give the reason why all things work together for good. Those are called according to his purpose, for those who love God. He says, for, that's a reason, those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to become conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he, Christ, might be the firstborn among many brothers. And you're thinking, how's that a reason for that? Well, he talks about called according to his purpose. Here he's defining God's purpose, or what he calls people to be conformed to the image of his Son, so that Christ could have many brothers just like him. I believe that's not only the purpose he's called us to, that is also the good. That if we are, whatever situation we go through, and we're choosing to love God, he is going to be using that to conform us to the image of his Son, Christ. And when we become more and more like Christ, the more we'll be able to have joy in any sort of situation, the more we can have peace we can't comprehend, the more just a fullness of life, a more abundant life that comes. And so we have the hope that if we continue to love God throughout all the disappointments, all these things, God is going to be working together for good. It's not good in itself, but he will work it for good. Another hope is that God will turn our mourning into joy. Jeremiah 31:13b says, God speaking, I will turn their mourning into joy. I will comfort them and give them gladness for sorrow. Sometimes when we go through things, it just seems so overwhelming. And we have to remember that God says, no, whatever sorrow we go through, he won't prevent that, but he will eventually turn it into joy. And again, when the Bible uses the word hope, it doesn't mean, well, I hope so, like I wish, I kind of hope this will happen. Hope here means a confident expectation of these things. So when you grieve with hope, you're not denying the reality of the pain. You're acknowledging it. But you are also acknowledging that, okay, God's going to use this together for good as I love him. The sorrow will be turned to joy. So you're looking at, you're experiencing the pain, but you're looking at it from a bigger picture. And that affects how we grieve. Now, we do need to grieve with hope to let go and let go well. If we want to know how to let go of the things that we've had no control, we have to learn how to let go, to grieve with hope. And depending on the loss, this can take some time. Now, I proposed marriage to 3 women, and I married 2 of them. The first one said no. Now, this is someone I had dated and got really smitten with, and wasn't that long I really felt that, yeah, this is someone I want to marry. And at some point I told her that, and she didn't have the same feeling, but I was confident that I could win her over. After a couple of months, I realized I could not win her over. Now, when I realized that that was over, there was a grieving process of a couple of months. However, when my first wife died, that was a grieving process of over a couple of years. So depending on the extent of the loss, it takes a different amount of time. But I also want to emphasize here, paradoxically, we can have joy while we grieve. Now, a lot of people, that blows their mind. They don't see how that's possible. But I want to testify that that is true. You can have grieve in one part of your soul and joy in another part. I'm going to tell a little bit about the background behind when my first wife died. If I get emotional here, just bear with me. But my wife had gotten a cancer that was a very rare type of cancer. And to slow, we found out it was terminal, but to slow the progress down, she had half of her liver removed. Now, that was a surgery. After recovering, we went to the doctors. They did some tests, and they found that the cancer had just spread to the other half. And so we realized that was it. So they said maybe we'd have a couple of months. So we started hospice, to have hospice in our house during the next day. We didn't have a couple of months. We had 1 week. Now, in that week, she was visibly worse from day to day. And I talked to her sister in Washington, D.C. on the phone, and she was saying about her. She had 2 brothers, 2 sisters, and they were talking about wanting to come out in a week. And as we were talking, she says, maybe we should just come out now. And I said, yeah, that seems good. So her 2 brothers, 2 sisters, her father, 2 nieces all came the next day or the day after. And the timing was amazing because she was able to talk during that time period. But after that, the next day, she was no longer able to talk. And it got to the point where she wasn't even able to move. And we one night spent the night with her up in, and it was on a Sunday night that as I was, all of us were gathered around the bed. My son, by the way, was home from college that week, so the timing was incredible that he could be there that week. But family were around the bed, and I was holding her hand and telling her I loved her. And while I was doing that, her breathing just got a little softer and softer, and then stopped. And, I wept like I never wept in my life. Now, this week was the worst week of my life, but it was also the most beautiful week of my life. I can't, because there was the love that was expressed there, the goodbyes, and everybody was able to be there. The next thing was to prepare her funeral. We talked about this. We wanted it to be a witness for Christ. She was working in a university setting. A lot of people were not Christians. I think like 400 people came for her funeral. It was a testimony. Now, I was in a lot of pain, but I can honestly say I had real joy then. Even when she was sick and at the funeral and for the next 2 years. In fact, at the funeral, some people's comment I heard that they said they thought I even looked happy. So again, for 2 years, it was regular pain, but there was still this pain, joy. The joy did not eliminate the pain, and it didn't even cover it up or minimize it, but it just side by side, that you could have this grief and pain and also a joy from the Lord. So the first main point is the biblical response to loss is grieving with hope. The second main point is this: don't be too surprised when you don't do this well. We're all broken people in need of repair. Now, I think I handled my wife's death pretty well, but I want to be honest with you. There are some small losses, minor ones, frustrations that I don't think I have handled too well at all. They have really gotten me out of sorts. And that's just a reflection, of the brokenness in me and that we all have. Now, when you don't respond well, when you find you can't grieve and grieve with hope, don't excuse it, or don't condemn yourself. Just seek God to repair. You say, God, I know this is a good way, but I can't grieve, and I can't grieve with hope. I'm just experiencing frustration. I'm just experiencing anger or depression, and just talk to God about that. And don't be too surprised, but say, I want you to work within me so I can grieve with hope. Now, the third point is that when you can't grieve with hope, that's a sign usually that something else deep needs letting go. Now, the things we have, these experiences of, obsession or depression or anger, those are all on the surface. And we try to let go of them, we can't. But that's because they're all coming from something below the surface. That there's things deeper that need to be let go. They can reflect, one thing would be some deep unresolved pains from before. That something happens and it triggers this memories of other pains we've had that have never been fully resolved and are still lodging within our soul. It could also maybe reflect some deep misbeliefs that God's not truly good. That would have this belief that, well, when bad things happen, that shows God's either he's mean or he's uncaring towards me. And that's a deep type of thing. You can't just sort of turn that off. Or very commonly, it's a misbelief that, well, I must have something else to be okay. Now, I want to make a distinction here. There's a difference between, I really, really want this. I really enjoy it, really like that, which I think is perfectly fine, completely legitimate. To really enjoy things, really want them, really not want some things I really don't want to have, COVID-19 or whatever. But there's a difference between that and saying, I must have that. It's got to be, and I'd say that attitude when you cross from I really, really want to, I must have it, it's become, now it's an idol or a sin. Now, and to explain why. Because when we come to that point, we're basically saying, God, you're not enough. I can't be happy without this. Or if I have this, bad thing, I can't be content. You are not sufficient enough to give me joy through other channels. And again, the whole area before of letting go of ourselves is we're giving God free access to ourselves, but say, no, I need to make sure I get this. And I'm going to be real frustrated, real angry if I don't. Now, why did the Israelites turn to idols? Well, if you look, it was for very practical reasons. Worshipping these idols would promise that they could get something that they wanted. And it might be that something they wanted, but didn't think, well, God may not want us to have it, but I must have it, so I'm going to worship this idol too. Now, the Israelites didn't worship the idols instead of God. They worshiped the idols with God, doing them simultaneously. But God says he's a jealous God. He doesn't want our heart and affections to anything else, that we have our hearts focused on him, trusting him to provide good things and providing a working in our hearts. So again, some of these deep things are going on beneath the surface when we can't grieve with hope. And I believe we cannot let go of these by ourselves. In the last session, mentioned that certain things we can let go of ourselves. If we think we're getting too consumed with something, we can stop it for a while or whatnot. These things are at a different level of magnitude. In that suitcase analogy of Rob Reimer, the things that need to be unpacked. Well, some of these things are so deep down, we can't get to them ourselves. We need him to get them out. Some number of you, I think, are familiar with the Chronicles of Narnia. And I believe it's the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. There's a character, Eustace, and there's, of course, the Christ-like figure, Aslan, in the books. And Eustace does something wrong, and he knows it, but in the process, in this fantasy, he gets turned into a dragon. And at some point, he wants to stop being a dragon. He tries to scrape off those scales, and it gets painful, but he just can't do it. And finally, what he has to do is he has to go to Aslan and says, okay, I need you to take care of it. And he submits himself to Aslan. And it's painful, but he does root it out, and he does able to get rid of, transform him back into who he's supposed to be. So the fourth point, and the final point, main point of this, is that to let go deeply, let go of some of these deep things takes going deep with the Lord. Letting go of deep pains or deep-rooted sins takes going deeper with the Lord than before, than we have been going. The reason I say it's deeper than we've been going, because if that was good enough, we would have been able to let go of them. But this shows that we need to let God into deeper parts of our souls, to our hearts, and get a closer connection, give access to some of the things we're ashamed of, or just in our things, and connect with him on a deeper level. We do that for him to clear out the pains, the misbeliefs, and the sins in our hearts. So I say, God, I need you, and I need you to do those things I can't get rid of myself. Also, it's to get rid of clinging sins that we can't seem to shake. In the Hebrews passage, Hebrews 12, it talks about the sins that cling closely or easily entangle us. Some of these things we just can't shake by ourselves. The classic example of this nowadays is pornography. I don't know that this is accurate, but I read somewhere that estimating that 90% of college guys and 50% of college women are now addicted to pornography. And for those who are Christians, a lot of times they want to get rid of it and stop for a while, but then keep coming back. It's something that's become, by engaging in it, it's had its claws in us. And you can try putting filters on the computer, getting accountability and things like that, but even that is not enough. It takes going there's something deeper that's deeply rooted, have to connect with the Lord, and having to spend more time connecting with him to really get rid of those permanently. Now, I want to share about experience over the past year. I mentioned at the beginning of this that this has been a year of revival for me, of experiencing a greater intimacy with God, a great joys. But a year ago was a different story. A year ago about this time, I was experiencing quite a bit of pain. My wife and I were having troubles. There were certain things about Teresa that I didn't think were right and were causing me pain. But honestly, I knew there were things about me. She had legitimate complaints about me that were causing her pain. And it got to the point where I actually did start to see Joseph to talk through some of these issues, start to get counsel, get coaching from him. And I made a decision early on just to let go of the things with Teresa. I'm just going to focus on the things with me. What is it, God, that you need to do with me? And tried to go deeper with him than I had been going before. And we went through the book Soul Care. I was able to go through a lot of sessions and open up and go deeper layers. In January of this year, went to one of Rob Reimer's Holy Spirit Weekend, and it was beneficial. He talked there about how he would take personal retreats to get alone with the Lord to deal with things. And I said, okay, I need to do that. So I scheduled a personal retreat. I found a campground up north, and I left it open as to when I would come back. I had two goals. First goal was that I wanted to experience God's presence, and I wanted to hear from God. So I went there not knowing exactly how long I was going to be staying there. Well, after about 2 days or so, where I realized, yeah, I think this has happened. It wasn't quite the way I pictured it was going to happen, but yeah, I think I have heard from God. I've experienced his presence. What I was hearing from him, God, is that why I hadn't been experiencing his presence and have not been hearing from him in general is that there had been different things that God had shown me that I had not done, not responded to. And so I wasn't really listening to him. Now, this may seem like a small thing here, but what came to mind, Teresa and I have an aquarium. Teresa has always had a hobby of saltwater fish, and so when we got married, it became my hobby too. And one time we were at the PetSmart in downtown Orlando with Colonial and Bumby, that shopping area, and we saw that there were these cleaner shrimp. Now, I'm not sure, they're about this long. They like to clean up all this junk in the thing, and they're kind of interesting to look at. And we asked the salesperson, well, how much are these? And he said, okay, well, I'll go check. And went to talk. And while he was going, we looked, oh, here it is. It says they're $35. That's a bit. Well, the salesperson comes back and says, yeah, those shrimp are $8. Okay, we'll take 2. So we got those, brought them home. Not too long after that, I had some quiet time, and God sort of convicted me that I needed to have spoken up. I needed to say, okay, I'm glad you're going to offer $8, but I do want to point out, it does say here $35. Are you sure you're willing to let us have that for $8? But I didn't do that. And I felt like, okay, guys, I need to go back and give the difference. Now, I made that decision, but it'd been like 2.5, 3 months, and I still hadn't gone back. I just hadn't found a convenient time to do that. And God was saying, I told you about that, but you didn't act on that. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. Let me think very specific. I thought through my schedule. Okay, Tuesday at lunchtime, I'm pretty sure I could free. Okay, Tuesday at lunch, when I get back, I'm going to drive over and pay the difference. Now, I drove back to Orlando. I was going to continue some more retreat time at church building. But as it's getting close, I felt like, you know, I don't think I should wait to Tuesday. I think I need to go there right now. And that's not like me, but I said, okay, I drove 20 minutes out of my way, went over to the store, told them what happened, and they said, well, thank you, but you know, we can't take the money now. It's already transactions concluded. And I said, well, I really want to pay the difference. And say, well, we do have a charity fund for animals. You can donate to that if you like. So I did that. But it seemed like a small thing, but it was more God working my heart. Am I going to be responsive? Am I going to be obeying when he says things? And again, from that time period came a sense of a greater joy. It's been more of a revival. I've experienced more of his life and his joy. Again, you don't let go for its own sake to be religious because it's the right thing to do. You're doing it to experience more of the life he has for us. But it is a fact that pain can motivate us to seek change and God. So if you're finding it that you are having trouble grieving with hope, this could actually be a good thing, and that it's going to drive you to God to deal with some of these things. I don't think if I had that pain to the extent that I had, I would have dealt with these issues and had the growth that I did. So in some ways, this pain can be a blessing in disguise.
To review all of this, the biblical response to loss is grieving with hope. When we find it hard to let go of things that we've had no control over, what helps is to be able to grieve the loss of that, but to do it in a way that you have a confidence that God is going to work all things together for good to those who love him, to those who are called according to his purpose. However, don't be too surprised when you don't do this too well. And the simple reason is we're all broken people. There are things that are hard to let go because of our brokenness. When you cannot grieve with hope, usually that's an indication that there's something else deep that needs letting go. It could be some deep-seated pains from the past that have been unresolved. It could be some deep-seated misbeliefs about God and his intentions towards us and what we really need to be satisfied in life. And if we want to let go of these, letting go deeply takes going deep with the Lord. We have to allow him into the deepest aspects of our souls and our hearts to do healing and to do changes and to let us let go of some of these deep things so we can let go of the surface things as well. I want to end with some application. Letting go deeply does take going deeper with the Lord than before. And my question is this: do you want to pursue this? Now, rather than just say, well, sure, think about that. Because if you want to, how? This would be something where you need to seek God's direction and then decide on a plan, how you can go deeper with the Lord. For me, a big turning point this year was when I decided to have that weekend retreat where I wanted to hear from God and not come back until I did. Other significant things of going deeper have been deciding to journal every day. Another has been more recent decision to want to have a couple of times a day to be still before the Lord. That's for me. For you, I don't know what it would be. You'd have to seek God's direction and find ways that you could go deeper with him. And as you travel on this path, share your journey with someone you trust. Talk about what's going well and what's going hard and where you're not finding yourself able to break through so you can encourage one another.